Hello, my dear. It still chills my bones to say this out loud, but I swear on every wrinkle I've earned, my husband was standing at his own funeral. I was seated in the second pew, clutching a handkerchief that smelled faintly of lavender and dust, the way old churches always do. The organ hummed low, like it was clearing its throat to say something dreadful. People murmured condolences behind me, soft voices brushing my back like moth wings. And then, there he was. Not in a memory, not in my grief. In the aisle. I saw the slope of his shoulders first, the same way he always stood when he didn't want to be noticed. Gray coat. That familiar limp in his left leg. My heart gave a hard, foolish leap, like it had forgotten the rules of death. I leaned forward, breath caught somewhere between prayer and panic, and whispered his name under my breath. No one heard me. No one turned. When he looked up, our eyes met. I felt it in my teeth, in my knees. That was my Harold. Older, yes, thinner, but alive in a way ghosts never are. His mouth didn't smile. It tightened, just a touch, the way it did when trouble was already too late to avoid. I blinked once, just once, and he was gone. My chest burned as if I'd swallowed fire. I stood too fast, the pew creaking loud enough to draw looks. A woman touched my arm, asking if I needed air. I nodded because it was easier than screaming. Outside, the sky hung low and colorless. Black coats clustered like crows. I pressed my palm to my chest, trying to slow a heart that suddenly remembered how to hope. That's when my phone vibrated. One message, no name. Run. They're watching us. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred, and somewhere behind me I felt it, that unmistakable sense of being seen. And not kindly. I didn't run. Not right away. I stood there on the church steps, the wind lifting the hem of my black skirt like it too, had secrets to share. My hands were trembling, and not from grief this time. I told myself it was a trick of the eye, some cruel shape of grief, but the message still glowed on my phone. Run. They're watching us. Us. Not you. Us. Which meant Harold had sent it. Which meant Harold was alive. Or someone wanted me to believe he was. I didn't tell anyone. Not Betty, not the kids, not even Pastor Merton when he came out and touched my shoulder, asking if I was all right. I nodded, said something about needing a moment alone, and he blessed me with that soft, pitying look men of God reserve for women coming undone. I left the funeral early. No graveside prayers, no ceremonial handful of dirt. Just me, my keys, and a dozen years of questions roaring in my head. I drove, somewhere, nowhere, just to move. It wasn't until I pulled into the empty parking lot of that old diner off Route 9, the one Harold and I used to sneak off to after church, back before the kids, that I let myself cry. Not pretty crying, not ladylike sniffling. Real, throat-scraping, soul-spilling sobs. Because what do you do when the dead man you've been mourning sends you a warning? You ask yourself if you ever really knew him. You ask yourself what he meant. You ask yourself why he told you to run. I opened my glove compartment. Harold's spare .38 revolver was still wrapped in that red flannel cloth he always kept it in. I'd never touched it before. He'd shown me how to shoot it once. Out back behind the barn, years ago. I never thought I'd need to remember. But something told me this wasn't just about Harold. Something told me I'd been a part of something all along. Something I never understood. Something dangerous. My phone buzzed again. A new message. Go to the place we met. Come alone. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. I knew exactly where he meant. And if I went, there would be no coming back the same. We met at a payphone, not in a diner, not in a park, not even in some romantic movie way. A grimy old payphone outside the county library 38 years ago, the kind that always smelled like burnt cigarettes and copper. I was 24, furious and stranded. My ex had driven off with my purse after a fight that ended in too many truths. I was sobbing, mascara on my chin, when a stranger offered me a handkerchief and 50 cents. That was Harold. And I swear to this day, when I looked into his eyes back then, it felt like finding home in a stranger's face. So yes, I knew exactly where he meant. That same payphone still stood, somehow immune to the world crumbling around it. It hadn't worked in years, but the booth remained like a relic, half swallowed by ivy and memory. When I got there, dusk was crawling over the sky. The light was soft, gray, uncertain. I parked 3 blocks away and walked. My pulse was a dull drum in my ears. No one else around, not visibly, but I felt them, watching. I stepped into the booth. My knees shook so badly I had to hold the frame just to stand. And there, taped under the broken receiver, was a key. Just a single brass key, marked with a faded strip of red tape. Like something from an old motel. I knew Harold's codes. Red meant safe, or at least, meant for me. I took it, and as soon as I did, a black sedan crept around the corner, headlights off. I ran, didn't think, didn't breathe, just ran. I ducked through alleys, twisted past backyard fences, heart galloping like it remembered how much it loved being alive. The sedan didn't follow, not right away, but I knew I'd only bought myself time. At home, I locked every door, drew every curtain, then went into the attic. That key had to be for something, and suddenly, I remembered. The old storage trunk, Harold's trunk. The one he told me never to open. The one he said held his military files. Only Harold was never in the military. Not really. He worked in communications, he said. He traveled for briefings. He couldn't talk about it. God help me, I believed him. Now, I wasn't sure what to believe. The key fit. The lock clicked. And what I found inside didn't belong to any version of Harold I had ever known. There were passports, 7 of them, all with Harold's face, and none of them bearing the name Harold. Different names, different nationalities. One even said he was Belgian. Another listed him as a Canadian telecom specialist. Each had a different birth date, different eyes, different hair, at least according to the paperwork. But the photos? Always him. Always my Harold. Older in some, younger in others, but the same jawline, the same scar near his left temple from when he fell off the roof fixing the gutter that spring after our daughter was born. There were also cash bundles, euros, dollars, francs, old currency, new bills, rubber-banded and neatly labeled in his tiny, tidy handwriting, and a gun, sleek, black, no serial number. My knees gave out. I sat right there on the attic floor, surrounded by insulation dust and secrets too big for the house to hold. I felt the weight of the years collapse onto me. Every absence, every late return, every lie disguised as love. I wasn't a wife. I was a cover. And I didn't know whether to grieve that or feel shame that part of me felt proud. He was always careful, always watching the exits, even at the grocery store, always sitting where he could see the door. I used to tease him for it, called him my little hawk. He'd just smile, tuck a hair behind my ear, and say, "Old habits." And now? Now I was inside those old habits, trying to crawl my way out. There was a notebook tucked in a false bottom panel, faded leather cover, my name written on the first page in ink so hard it had almost cut through the paper. Patricia, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But not dead. That's how it began. Then 3 lines down, they were getting close. I had to disappear. You're in danger too now. There's a plan. You have to finish it. There was no signature, but the writing was Harold's. I'd seen it on birthday cards, on grocery lists, on every little note he'd ever tucked into my coat pocket in winter. And then I heard it. Glass downstairs, shattering. I wasn't alone. The notebook fell from my hands as I reached for the revolver. Dust in my throat, panic hammering in my chest. Footsteps on the stairs, slow, careful. I'd buried Harold 2 days ago, and now someone was coming up the attic stairs. For me. The floorboards groaned. Each step sent a throb through my chest like a drumbeat marching me toward the edge. I crouched low behind a stack of old boxes, the revolver clutched in both hands like it was the last solid thing in my world. My fingers remembered Harold's lesson from that one afternoon behind the barn. Firm grip, steady breath. Don't flinch unless you want to miss. I didn't want to miss. The footsteps paused just outside the attic door. For a moment, the silence was worse than the sound. Then came the voice. "I'm not here to hurt you, Patricia, but we don't have time." It wasn't Harold. It was a woman, mid-30s maybe, calm, measured, and American, flat accent, no drawl or lilt, just steady as a metronome. I stayed crouched. "Who are you?" She didn't open the door. "He told me if anything happened, I had to get to you. They know you've opened the trunk. That was the trigger. They're coming." "I don't know who they are," I hissed. The woman's voice softened. "Neither did I, until I married into it." That did it. I stood, slowly, gun raised, and opened the attic door. She stood there in a black coat, her hair pulled back, face pale from the cold. She wasn't armed, at least not visibly. Her eyes flicked to the gun in my hand, but didn't flinch. "You don't remember me," she said. "But I was at the funeral. Third pew, next to the man in the gray coat." My blood turned to ice. "The one who looked like my husband." She nodded. "That wasn't Harold," she said. "Not your Harold, but close." She stepped back, gave me room to come down. I did, but slowly, my legs stiff with fear. "In the notebook," she said. "He left you coordinates, didn't he?" I didn't answer. "You're not the only one they're hunting," she said. "He trusted you with the end game. And if we don't move now, Patricia, they'll erase us both." I wanted to scream, to collapse, but my body was ahead of my spirit. It was already moving. I grabbed the notebook, the key, the revolver, and left my house behind. We drove through the night, across state lines, silent most of the way. She gave me a burner phone and instructions I didn't know I could follow, but I did. The coordinates led to a storage unit in a nowhere town, the kind where the streets smell like creosote and dust, and the air is always dry. Inside the unit, we found it. A wall of files, photos, names, code phrases, surveillance logs, and one document marked with a red wax seal. At the top, Project Hawkwinter. At the bottom, status, compromised, asset escaped, asset. That was Harold, and I realized he'd been on the run from them for years. And now I was part of the escape plan. Not because he needed me to save him, but because, God help me, I was the contingency. I couldn't breathe, not from panic, not even from fear, from the weight of the truth. He was alive, out there, speaking in that same low, measured tone I knew better than my own heartbeat. My Harold. Changed, yes, but alive. And now I knew. I wasn't the widow of a quiet telecommunications engineer. I was the wife, the liability, the wild card, the loose thread, of a man who had been hunted by his own. And now they were hunting me. Claire was already moving. She pulled open another metal box in the corner of the storage unit and revealed something wrapped in oilcloth. When she unfurled it, I recognized it. The sat phone Harold had once jokingly called his dinosaur. I'd laughed, thought it was some outdated tech thing from his consulting days. No, it was something else entirely. "He said not to trace the call," Claire murmured. that if it ever came to this, we'd have only one shot to follow his trail. She handed me a GPS device, preloaded, one blinking red dot. Last known location. We drove again, for hours. No music, just the sound of the tires chewing through distance and the occasional crackle of Claire's earpiece. She had contacts, she said. Quiet ones. A former handler in New Mexico, a safe house outside Knoxville. Names I wasn't supposed to remember, but I did. My mind was sharp now. Grief had been fog. But this was fire. The red dot took us to a place Harold and I had visited once, years ago, during a road trip when the kids were grown and we'd finally had time to be just us. A cabin in North Carolina, tucked into the holler like God had cupped it in his hand. It had been empty then, beautiful, lonely. It wasn't empty now. The door was unlocked, the way he always left it when he was waiting for me. Inside, nothing, until I looked closer. There were fresh footprints on the old floorboards. A fire had been lit not long ago, coffee grounds still warm in the percolator, and on the table, another note, written in Harold's hand. Don't trust her. Claire isn't who she says she is. I didn't turn around. Not yet. I just stared at the words, my hand trembling. Then I heard the soft click, not of a lock, of a safety being released, behind me. Claire's voice was no longer calm. Now, Patricia, she said gently, let's talk about what Harold didn't tell you. I didn't move. I could feel the cold metal of the gun pointed at my back without needing to see it. I knew that sound, the distinct, almost delicate click of a trained hand easing a weapon into readiness. But what rattled me most was her voice. It had shifted, still soft, but now coiled, tighter, like a violin string pulled to the point of snapping. What did he promise you? I asked, still facing the note. My voice came out steadier than I expected. A payoff? An extraction plan? Claire gave a little exhale, almost a laugh. He promised me the truth, but Harold never gives truth, Patricia. Only pieces of it. Versions. He played me just like he played you. I turned, slowly. Her pistol was leveled at my chest. Not shaking, not bluffing. It was military, compact, matte black. I recognized it from the files. Agency issue. I thought you were one of them, I said. A cleaner. She shook her head. I was one of them. So was he. But Harold walked off script long before you ever met him. They couldn't kill him without blowing half a dozen back doors. So they buried him in his own life. You were supposed to keep him anchored, quiet, domestic. My mouth went dry. You're saying I was part of an op? You were the op, she said. That landed hard. Years, birthdays, anniversaries, all the ordinary moments I'd held on to, reframed now in cold, brutal strategy. Claire lowered the gun just slightly. But here's the thing, she said, her voice tightening. Harold didn't go dark for justice. He went rogue. He stole something the old network still wants, and he left clues, with you. I stared at her. I have no idea what he took. She stepped closer. I think you do. You just don't know you do. Her free hand went into her coat and pulled out a photograph. I flinched. It was my daughter, taken recently, at a bus stop, with her son, my grandson, on her lap. My knees nearly buckled. You're bluffing, I whispered. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. You want to protect them? Claire asked. Then stop pretending you're some innocent widow and think. What did Harold hide in your life? What did he give you, gift you, mention only once? My breath came ragged. One memory, odd and sudden, rose up from the dust of the past like a skeleton. A charm bracelet. A cheap little silver thing he gave me one winter, years ago, no occasion, said he found it in a shop near the border on a work trip. I'd worn it for a while, then tucked it away in a drawer. Each charm had a letter on it. Just nonsense letters, I thought. Until now. I swallowed hard. "I think I know where it is," I said, but something shifted in her eyes. Not relief, something else, like she'd just confirmed a theory, and now she didn't need me anymore. I backed away from her, not fast, just enough to put the table between us. She noticed, of course. Professionals like Claire always notice. But she didn't raise the gun again. Not yet. I kept my hands where she could see them and forced myself to breathe normally, even as my heart thudded like a frightened animal trapped in a cage of bone. "The bracelet," I said slowly, "is in my jewelry box. Back home. Bottom drawer, wrapped in an old velvet pouch." Claire tilted her head, like she was listening for the lie beneath the truth. "You're sure?" she asked. I gave her the flattest look I could manage. "I'm a woman in her 70s. I don't misplace jewelry." She studied me another second. Then she nodded. And that was when I realized I still had one thing she didn't expect. Time. Claire had no idea where the bracelet really was. She didn't know I'd moved it 6 years ago during a cleaning spree, tossed it in an old box of winter scarves and forgotten it entirely until this moment. She believed me. For now. I glanced at the clock on the wall behind her. 5 minutes past midnight. And then, somewhere outside, I heard it. 3 short chirps. Birdsong. In the dead of night. But it wasn't birdsong. It was the signal. Harold's signal. Years ago, after a power outage, we had created a simple knock pattern for emergencies. 3 short taps. We used it once when the landline died and he was stuck in a snowstorm, and again when a stranger came to the door and I didn't feel safe. He joked that even if everything else failed, birds would still sing. It was a code. He was here. Claire heard it too. She froze for a fraction of a second. I moved, not toward her, toward the window. I slammed the wooden shutters shut with a crash, and in that half-second of distraction, the door burst open. Not Harold, but a man I'd never seen, tall, broad, armed, not aiming at me. "Claire," he barked, "stand down!" She spun, gun raised, but too late. He was already on her, disarming her in a blur of motion so fast it made my head spin. She fought hard. He fought harder. The gun clattered across the floor, and she was pinned beneath him before she could recover. I stood there, shaking. The man looked up at me. "You Patricia?" I nodded, breathless. "Who are you?" He pulled a badge from inside his coat. An agency I didn't recognize. Letters I'd never seen before. "Harold sent me." I dropped to the nearest chair, knees no longer able to hold me. Claire wasn't fighting anymore, just smiling, a small, knowing smile. "You think this is over?" she said from the floor, voice calm again. "You think Harold's the hero?" The agent pulled zip ties from his belt. "Save it." But she kept talking. To me. "You're still only seeing part of it, Patricia. You always have." I wanted to tell her to shut her mouth. But a part of me, the part Harold fell in love with all those years ago, knew she was right. There was more than the bracelet, more than Hawkwinter, more than Harold had ever led on. And now I wasn't just a widow, or a wife. I was the last person alive holding pieces both sides would kill to possess. The cabin was quiet again. Claire had been taken, restrained, loaded into a nondescript SUV that melted back into the trees with barely a sound. The man Harold had sent stayed behind, said his name was Boone. Not first name, not last name, just Boone. He didn't talk much, didn't ask if I was all right, didn't offer a blanket or a cup of tea or any of the kindnesses you expect after a woman's had a gun in her face and a dead man's secrets dumped in her lap. He just stood by the door, scanning the tree line, a rifle slung low against his hip like it belonged there. I sat at the table, staring at the note. Don't trust her. No signature, just that familiar slant of Harold's writing. No flourish, no emotion, just a warning. Boone finally broke the silence. We need to go. I looked up. Where? He met my eyes. To him. Everything in me went still. I wanted to cry or scream or bury my face in my hands, but my body wouldn't move. I just whispered, "He's close?" Boone nodded once. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt the weight of it settle heavy on my chest. "What if I don't recognize him?" I said. "You will," Boone said without hesitation. "He's different, yeah, but you'll know." I stood slowly. My knees ached. My back screamed from the hours of tension, but I was moving. I was still here, and I hadn't come this far to run now. We drove for 3 hours, down roads that weren't on any map, past old barns and dry creeks and forests that felt like they hadn't seen light in years. Finally, Boone stopped at an old hunting lodge, boarded up, forgotten. I knew the place. Harold and I had been here once before the kids, on a winter weekend getaway when we were still figuring out how to be together. We'd nearly frozen to death trying to light the fireplace. I'd burned the soup. He made me laugh so hard I cried. Back then it was just a place. Now it was something else. Boone didn't come in, just nodded toward the door. He's inside, waiting. I climbed the creaking steps. My hand hovered over the doorknob. And then I opened it. He was there, sitting in the armchair beside the cold hearth. Thinner. His beard was salt and pepper now. A scar I'd never seen before cut across his jaw. But when he looked up, those eyes, my Harold. He didn't smile, didn't cry. He just whispered, "You found the bracelet, didn't you?" I closed the door behind me and said, "You better start telling me everything, because they almost killed me for it." He nodded, then stood, walked to the small desk in the corner, opened a drawer, and pulled out something wrapped in a handkerchief I hadn't seen in years. He placed it in my hands, the bracelet, but heavier now, and inside, hidden in one of the charms, was something I never imagined. A microdrive, tiny, cold, and labeled in tiny etched letters, Aegis Protocol, eyes only. I looked up at him. He looked tired, but not sorry. "They didn't just want to erase us," he said. "They wanted to erase what we knew." "And now?" I asked. He looked at me. Then for the first time in years, he smiled. "Now they'll wish they'd left us dead." We didn't run, not this time. Harold and I sat together in that dusty lodge, no longer husband and wife in the ordinary sense, but partners, finally equal in truth. The microdrive contained names, accounts, proof, enough to scorch the earth beneath every man and woman who tried to bury us. Boone returned days later with safe passage, but we chose to stay hidden a little longer, to plan, to remember who we were before all this, before lies replaced laughter. One night I asked him, "Was any of it ever real?" He took my hand, his voice rough with age and guilt. "All of it," he said. "You were the only part that was never a cover." I believed him. Because love, when it's real, survives even the lie of death.